Hello, and welcome back to the News Closet, where I give you news updates related to Evermore Park. Today, I want to mostly talk about construction that has been ongoing and things that are upcoming at Evermore Park. But first, I wanted to talk about how lure auditions have opened up. Evermore Park is looking for scare actors and more for their spooky Halloween season. That means that they're going to need people to work in the haunt, as a variety of different creatures there that can scare the patrons that are brave enough to go within. They're also going to be looking for a diverse cast to play interesting characters that are elsewhere in the park. A requirement to work for the park in this regard is that you are 17 years or older before the Halloween season starts. And of course, that you are comfortable working outdoors and in front of large crowds. You must be available for 80% of Fridays and Saturdays during the season, and the lure season takes place throughout the entirety of September and October. So, in order for you to make 80% of Fridays and Saturdays, you must live in the Utah area, unless you wanted to just pull a Connor and move here. I've heard in the past that they're willing to accept virtual auditions if you wanted to see if you got accepted before you made such a bold play. If you wanted to learn more about how to do that, just leave a comment, I guess, so that we can start to talk about it. Obviously, don't audition unless you're actually interested in filling the role, but I have auditioned at Evermore Park before, and while I was there, I felt like I should have had to pay to be there and laugh and be entertained by all these extremely talented folks that are trying out. If you would like to apply, I'll put the link where you can do so in the description. You'll have to click on it and upload your acting resume and your headshots to register your interest. Auditions will take place on the evening of Thursday, July 13th. And if they like what they see, there will be callbacks on the morning of Saturday, July 15th, less than 2 days later. So that's it, keeping you up to date on auditions. Now, in a second from now, when I talk to you about construction, I'll look a little different. This morning, my daughter wanted to play with my hair and put a bunch of bows in it. And before she left for school, she took my face in her hands and said, "Daddy, please don't take the bows out until I get home." So I'm stuck like this for now because I can't say no to that. But I'll be back with a different look in the evening to tell you about visible construction that has been starting at Evermore Park. Hey, I have returned. Welcome back to your favorite blank, empty room. I put the kiddo down to sleep, and it's been a long day. I wonder if I look different other than not having bows in my hair. I wonder if I look tired to you. Well, it doesn't matter, because we're talking about construction at Evermore Park. But before I can talk about that, I have an annoying amount of backstory to give context. Now, when I look at Evermore Park, I split it into two halves. First comes everything that is inside of the circle, which I call the inner loop or the town loop. And then there's my favorite part of the park, which is the outer loop, everything outside of that main circle. The outer loop is set up as a kind of winding walkthrough, which is closer to the original intent of the park. Start in these beautiful gardens, you go through a tavern, you walk around the mill, there's the slanting shanty there on the side. Now you get into Loudon's Rest, and the theming of Loudon's Rest gets closest to Evermore's original spooky history from where it drew its inspiration. And then you get into the Highlands area of the park. You pass through the Moon Gate, you go into the Burrows or the Pygmyweed Inn, which for a lot of people is the most iconic spot in the park. And then you kick out on that side, and as it stood, that's where the walkthrough kind of ended. But there is this additional fourth area of the outer loop called Clawthorn Hallow. When the park first opened, Clawthorn Hallow in the lore was kind of the edge of the wilderness, and you can even see this reflected in this map that came over a year later. It's still kind of mostly trees. It's out in this area of the wilderness that hasn't yet been tamed, where we haven't built stuff yet. Now that can kind of be reflected in the reality of the park. Here's the most recent Google Maps satellite image of Evermore Park. Now the copyright stuff down at the bottom says that this imagery comes from 2023, but that cannot be possible because what we're seeing in front of us is definitely from when I started going to the park in Mythos 2022. I can tell this because the battle arena here is split into two, which they didn't do until Mythos 22. This used to be one big open area. The big free-for-all battle takes place under the circus tent. I can also tell that the tent that used to be here to distribute weapons and such has moved, And I know that it can't be much further in the future from that. It isn't lore, for instance, because we don't see our big pumpkin friend over here. But in this map from a year ago, you can tell the difference. You have Glenshire Grove over here, and it's this green, fully realized area. There's no empty gaps where you could really put in something substantial like a new building. The same can be said for Loudon's Rest right here and the Highlands area of the park. Those areas are about what was conceptualized, and they're kind of done. But the last of the four areas, the Clawthorn Hallow, appears different on the map. Even in a lot of the concepts, it was seemingly a little less developed what they wanted to do with this space. Now, in this satellite image from a year ago, we're seeing an area of the park that wasn't even accessible. You have all these things blocking the path up to Dragonhaven. You have these no-no pillars preventing you from getting deeper in. Same area is blocked off here at the bottom. So that's the state that this area of the park was in a year ago. Now, it is insane to me how much has changed in just my short lifetime visiting Evermore. Last June, almost exactly a year ago, Drakenhaven opened as a regular attraction for all guests for the first time. In Mythos, there was one guild in this area, which was the Dragon Trainers. Starting the next season in lore, they took down these barriers and made this path traversable by guests with a gravel walkway. And that walkway connected the two guilds that were now in this area. There was the Coven in the Ruins, and the Adventurers Guild in the Hunter's Hovel. Drakenhaven as well remained a big attraction, housing the mayor and others, as well as some of the most interesting new theming in the park, like a lot of the mayor's experimental gadgets. The following season in Aurora saw additional development, with the battle arena being moved here to the Hallow from its previous location over here in the Inner Circle. The Ruins saw Mr. and Mrs. Claus and some Elves of Light. The Wolves of Winter were a guild up here in Drakenhaven, and the Hunter's Hovel housed the Peppermint Duchy. At this point last season, this part of the park is already the most developed it has ever been. So, how has it already gotten better since then? As we've already mentioned, the battle arena has made its way over to here. New in Mythos, the knife throwing range has also been relocated to this area. And the Knights Guild is now posted up here between these two. The biggest and most exciting visual change for me by far is the addition of the Pirates area. Now, previously there was this pathway where you could walk up and go to this bridge, and it just kind of ended in a dead end without anything exciting to see. Now, at the end of that path is an immaculately themed pirate area, complete with a crow's nest and a ship wheel and all other sorts of scattered remnants of a pirate ship. There's now also water in this previously dry bed. The bridge kind of goes over water now, and it adds an additional feature to the park. Drakenhaven remains open and currently houses the Dragon Trainers again, and continues to have some of the best theming in the park. It now has this beautiful glowing light that can be triggered if you touch the right thing. And you can find some unseelie fae inside of the ruins, and the fairy tales show will take place here as well. So this is the current state of this area of the park if you were to go today. And for me, it's already unbelievable. This area of the park has 4 different guilds packed tightly within yelling distance. These guilds are always interacting with one another and getting up to different shenanigans. There's also more familiar, straightforward activities for new guests to get into, with knife throwing and battling your friends with foam swords. This area of the park in less than a year has already transformed from a spot that was inaccessible to the highlight of the park. There is now more for you to do and engage with in the Clawthorn Hallow, if that's even what this is called anymore, than nearly the rest of the park combined. And that's just today. But I'm making this video because there's even more changes upcoming, so let's get into that. Okay, so the most visible changes that are currently taking place in this area are improvements to the walkways. As I mentioned, they added a walkway for guests here, but it is a gravel walkway. When Evermore Park first opened, all of the walkways were this type of gravel path. But soon after that, they were improved to asphalt. So when you're traversing anywhere elsewhere in the park, your feet are hitting pavement. The park is currently preparing to make the same improvements to this, and I personally find it interesting that you can see Ken, the founder of the park, out there raking the gravel to clear the way to get this all paved. It's not every day that you see somebody who owns something like this getting hands-on manicuring it, so I thought that was pretty cool. I've never had a conversation with the guy, so I don't know anything, but to me it seems to show that he really does care about the park. And after this pavement is completed, they're not done with their plans for this area. In the long term, they hope to do even more. I'll mention some examples of potential future plans related to the battle arena, which are that they hope to build some bleachers around the battle arena for people to watch the epic sword fighting and be entertained. And also this structure here, which I've heard some people refer to as kind of like a grain silo, this was originally going to be built into a magic tree. But the plan that fits better with the current concept of a future Evermore is to have this structure be related to the battle arena right next to it. It would be transformed into an armory that appears as a sort of castle turret or tower. So in short, there have been drastic improvements to improve this corner of the park in a very short time. And there are even more things to come. There is also construction worth talking about inside of the inner loop. So, everything inside of this circle, the inner loop or the town loop. I'm gonna have to speed things up quite a bit here because I already talked about the outer loop for much longer than I had planned. In the old town portion of the park, which is this top half, the farther from the entrance part, this old spot that used to have the dueling arena and knife throwing range now houses the eponymous Dragon Lantern of the Mythos Dragon Lantern Festival. And this space that was previously empty on this map now has additional shop structures for the vendors. They added this cool water tower theming next to the train line here. And perhaps most notably in this area, they have improved the performers stage from this previous wooden version that was really starting to show its age to a new concrete platform. On the bottom town square half of this section, the most noticeable change is on the main stage. Now, in Aurora, this main stage is where ice skating would take place. I was there this spring to see them pulling up those ice skating sheets, and there was the original plywood underneath. And then on a subsequent week, they pulled up that plywood for the first time that I had ever seen, revealing the beams and original intended water feature that is underneath. A week after that, even those beams were gone, and it was clear that they were beginning to fill in that intended water feature. Now, this is one of the first things that you'll see right when you enter the park, so you might be wondering what the plan is there.
That machine anyway.
The plan is to pave this stage in the front of the park as they recently did with the circus stage in the back. And this will give rise to new opportunities to use this large space in the future. Now, you can't talk about construction in the front half of the park without mentioning everyone's favorite building to speculate about, the Emory Chapel. I say this because this is probably the largest building in the park and the most frequently pointed to when discussing unfinished buildings. There have been construction materials spotted around this church, so feel free to let your mind go wild on what that could possibly mean. Anyway, that's just some of what I wanted to talk about, but this video has already gotten a lot longer than I intended, so I will have to save some of that for a subsequent visit to the news closet. Until then, thank you very much for spending time with me.